Do you want a practical example? Imagine you're in a negotiation and someone says, "That's the best price I can give you." If you respond immediately by trying to argue, you've already lost. But if you simply stay silent and hold your gaze, the other person will feel the need to fill that void. In most cases, they'll offer a better price without you having to say a word. This happens because silence shifts the pressure of the conversation to the other side, and this is where we start to get into the real techniques. If you want to lead conversations instead of being led, you need to learn to use pace, pauses, and silence strategically. People who speak too quickly lose authority. People who fill every space in the conversation convey insecurity. Those who learn to hold back their words and use silence intelligently dominate the interaction without having to raise their voice. If there's one thing that separates mediocre communicators from elite social strategists, it's controlling the pace of conversation. Most people speak in the same tone, at the same pace, with the same predictability. They react rather than lead. Those who truly master conversation understand that every pause, every silence, and every change in speed can shape perceptions, create tension, generate authority, and manipulate emotions. And the first great weapon in this silent war is the power of silence. Few things are more uncomfortable for the human brain than an empty space in a conversation. Our natural instinct compels us to fill it, and that's exactly where the game is. When you talk less and pause more, the other person feels an increasing need to keep talking, revealing more than they should and often compromising themselves without realizing it. Great negotiators know this. Great interrogators know this. But most ordinary people despair of silence and feel an almost compulsive need to fill it. And this leads us to a fatal mistake. Talking too much undermines your authority. If you've ever tried to convince someone of something and felt like you had to justify, explain, and restate over and over again, you've fallen into this trap. The more you talk to try to convince, the less credibility you convey. People respect those who convey confidence with fewer words, not more. Strategic pausing works because it creates psychological tension, and the human brain wants to relieve that tension as quickly as possible. That's why, in a job interview or negotiation, if you answer a difficult question right away, it looks like you're nervous or have something to hide. But if you pause before answering, your answer seems more thoughtful, more confident, and more powerful. Silence, when used well, forces the other side to respect you. Now, here's an even more advanced trick: the restatement technique. This is simple but extremely effective. Whenever someone says something that you want to explore further, instead of answering directly, repeat the person's last words but with a tone of curiosity or in the form of a question. Example: I don't think this project is going in the right direction. Isn't it going in the right direction? By doing this, you force the other person to elaborate further. This technique activates a psychological trigger that makes the other side feel like they need to better justify their position, and more often than not ends up revealing information they weren't planning on. Great interviewers, psychologists, and even investigators use this to extract more details without seeming pushy. Another crucial point to mastering a conversation is varying the pace. There is an invisible rule. Whoever sets the pace of the conversation controls the interaction. If you speed up the pace, the other person tends to feel pressured and respond without thinking much. If you slow down, you create an effect of authority and depth. A great trick here is to start speaking slowly and then strategically increase the speed when you want to generate excitement or intensity. A clear example of this is great orators and leaders. People like Barack Obama and Steve Jobs were masters in the art of using long pauses and powerful silences to keep the audience's attention. They spoke slowly, giving their words time to sink in, and only sped up when they wanted to emphasize something. This creates a hypnotic effect. An experiment by Harold Schlossberg, one of the pioneers of communication psychology, showed that unexpected pauses have more impact than well-chosen words. In the study, identical speeches were tested on two groups. One where the speaker spoke without interruptions and another where he made strategic pauses. The result? The group that listened to the speech with pauses remembered 33% more of the information and reported a greater sense of trust in the speaker. Have you ever exited a discussion feeling defeated without even realizing it was a competition? Have you ever observed that some individuals can persuade you, change your perspective, or even make you feel guilty without raising their voice or using aggressive tactics? If this has occurred to you, congratulations. You've been influenced. But before this sounds like a criticism, understand that we've all been influenced. And if you don't know how to recognize the signs and master the invisible rules of social interactions, this will continue to happen. The harsh reality is that conversations are not just exchanges of words. They are power struggles. In this game, either you control or you are controlled. The issue is that most people believe a conversation is just a way of expressing oneself. But this is a critical error. Communication is strategy. Every word, every pause, every response you give or don't give builds or destroys your position. While you think you are just having a conversation, there are people playing a much more advanced game, shaping perceptions, guiding responses, and creating realities inside the minds of others. The worst part is that these techniques are often used against you without you even realizing it. But what if it were the other way around? What if you could turn the tables, master the pace of the conversation, make people feel confident in you, effortlessly lead discussions without having to shout or impose yourself aggressively? And what's more, what if you could neutralize any attempt to manipulate you? This video is about that. In the next few minutes, you will learn the hidden rules of high-level communication techniques that leaders, negotiators, and even manipulators use to control interactions and always come out on top. It all starts with an essential question: who really has control of the conversation? The biggest misconception people have about communication is that a conversation is just an exchange of ideas. This is a critical error. Every conversation, whether at work, in a relationship, or even in casual chat, is a silent battleground where someone is inevitably leading and someone is being led. But the most dangerous question is not who is in control, but who doesn't even realize they are being controlled. Think about it. How many times have you left a conversation feeling awkward, like you gave in too much, agreed to something you didn't want to, or revealed information you hadn't planned on? Now, try to remember the other person. Did they use a specific tone of voice? Did they use strategic pauses that made you say more than you should? Did you unwittingly follow their rhythm instead of setting your own? If any of these answers are yes, you were not in control. This difference between who leads and who follows doesn't happen by chance. It follows precise rules. If you don't know them, you're already starting any conversation at a disadvantage. Here's a harsh fact: the respect you receive in an interaction doesn't come from what you say, but from how you say it. That brings us to the first big revelation. Manipulation and persuasion are the same thing, but with opposite intentions. Think of a great leader and a skilled con artist. What do they have in common? They both use influence techniques. They both know how to guide a conversation. They both understand how to use words to plant ideas in the minds of others. The only difference is that one does it to add value and the other to exploit. In other words, the technique itself is not good or bad. What defines the impact is the intention behind it. And here's the irony. Most people reject the idea of learning influence because they don't want to manipulate others. But by doing so, they automatically put themselves in the position of being manipulated. Because like it or not, these techniques are in play all the time. You can ignore them and be thrown from one side to the other without realizing it. Or you can understand them and use them to protect yourself and steer conversations in your favor. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said that thoughts are the shadows of our feelings, always darker, emptier, simpler than these. What does this mean? That the way we feel something in a conversation influences more than the words spoken. A leader can say a single sentence and influence an entire group without having to explain anything. A manipulator can make you feel uncomfortable even without saying a single directly aggressive word. This happens because the real influence happens between the lines, not in the explicit speech. And this is the first principle to turn the game around. Words matter less than the structure of the conversation. The tone, the rhythm, the use of silence, and even eye contact create what we call the frame of the conversation. Whoever defines this frame controls the interaction. Now, imagine applying this to your everyday life. A negotiation where you create pauses that force the other side to say more than they would like. A difficult conversation where you purposefully slow down to show control. A debate where you use silence to let the other side get bogged down. These are communication tools that turn anyone into a social strategist. And that brings us to the next level: how to build influence without seeming manipulative. So far, we've talked about pace and control, but there's something even more powerful: getting people to trust you and follow your suggestions without it feeling forced. And to do that, you need to understand the power of subconscious connection and progressive micro-affirmations. By now, you've learned how silence, rhythm, and strategic pauses give you power over any conversation. But there's another element that separates amateur manipulators from true masters of influence: building genuine connection. And the truth is that without this, all of the above techniques can seem cold or mechanical. People are more easily influenced when they like and trust you, and that's where one of the most powerful psychological triggers comes in: progressive affirmation. This concept is based on a simple rule from behavioral psychology. The more times someone agrees with small statements throughout the conversation, the harder it will be for that person to disagree with you later. It works like this. If you want to convince someone of something, start by asking questions or making statements that are obvious and easy to agree with. Example: it's interesting how time flies when we're focused, isn't it? I think everyone has experienced feeling overwhelmed sometimes. Every little yes that the person says strengthens an unconscious bond and creates a natural tendency to continue agreeing with you. This is because the human brain hates inconsistency. If someone agrees with something several times, rejecting their idea in the end would create an internal conflict. And since our mind seeks consistency, the tendency is to keep agreeing. Now, if you want to take this to the next level, use the mirroring technique. This is one of the most effective weapons for generating instant connection. It is based on the simple idea of mirroring the other person's body language, tone of voice, and energy in a subtle way. If someone speaks more slowly, slow down. If the person crosses their arms, wait a few seconds and do the same. But be careful. It has to be natural, or it will seem artificial and forced. The reason this works is that the human brain is programmed to trust people who are more like us. A classic study from the University of Nijmegen showed that participants who had their movements mirrored by an interviewer reported a significantly higher level of sympathy for that person, even without consciously realizing what was happening. But here's an advanced detail that few people know. Mirroring doesn't have to be just physical. It can be emotional. This means that if someone is excited, mirror that excitement in your energy. If they're serious, tone it down a bit. This synchronicity creates an invisible alignment that makes the other person feel like you're on the same wavelength. Now, there's a third factor that breaks down any barriers of resistance and makes people trust you without you having to force anything. The paradox of controlled vulnerability. Most people believe that showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness, but the truth is that when done strategically, it can be one of the most powerful weapons for creating connection. The trick here is not to go around telling everyone your problems, but rather to reveal small vulnerabilities that make you seem more human. For example, instead of trying to look perfect in a presentation, admit something like, "When I first started learning about this topic, I also found it complicated." This activates the psychological closeness effect because the other person feels that you are approachable and genuine. This is exactly why politicians, public speakers, and experienced salespeople always share short stories of hardship before presenting their solutions. They create an emotional bridge before persuasion. Now, think of all these techniques working together. You use progressive affirmations to align the other person's mindset with yours. You use mirroring to generate a subconscious feeling of familiarity. And you use the paradox of controlled vulnerability to make your presence more authentic and trustworthy. This is high-level influence. And here's the kicker. If you master these techniques, you can guide any interaction without coming across as manipulative. People will want to agree with you, trust you, and follow your suggestions without even realizing they're being influenced. Most people go through life without realizing that they are being manipulated in almost every conversation they have. They believe that communication is just an exchange of words without realizing that behind every dialogue, there is a silent struggle for control. But now you know that conversations are not just about what is said, but about who sets the pace, who shapes the structure, and who defines the reality within which the interaction takes place. You understand that strategic pauses, silence, and controlling the pace can give you more authority than any well-crafted argument. You have learned that small affirmations throughout a conversation create a psychological effect that makes persuasion inevitable. And you have seen that the true power of communication lies in the invisible frame that defines who is in charge. Starting today, every time you enter a conversation, pay attention. Who is leading? Who is reacting? Who is setting the pace? If it is not you, then you are on the wrong side of the game. And what separates those who control interactions from those who are controlled is not natural talent, charisma, or exceptional intelligence. It is simply the knowledge of these techniques and the ability to apply them strategically.